Welcome to World Prism. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Let's start with the basics. A tariff is essentially a tax that governments place on goods brought in from other countries. When a product crosses a border, the government can charge an extra fee, which is the tariff. This extra cost makes foreign products more expensive for consumers, which often encourages people to buy goods made in their own country instead. The idea is to give local businesses a better chance to compete. Throughout history, tariffs have been used for several reasons: to protect important industries, to raise money for the government, or to put pressure on other countries during negotiations. Under President Trump, tariffs became a central part of his economic strategy, making headlines around the world. Trump argued that the U.S. trade deficit, when America buys more from other countries than it sells, was a sign of weakness and a threat to the nation's economic strength. To tackle this, he imposed sweeping tariffs on goods from major trading partners like China, Canada, and Mexico, as well as other countries, affecting a wide range of products. The most notable were the so-called Liberation Day tariffs, which slapped rates from 10% to 50% on most imports, making many everyday items more expensive. Trump even declared a national emergency, arguing that trade deficits were linked to bigger issues like drug trafficking and border security, and that urgent action was needed. He claimed these tariffs would revive American manufacturing, bring back lost jobs, and force other countries to agree to fairer trade deals that would benefit U.S. workers. This marked a sharp break from previous presidents who generally supported free trade and lower tariffs, believing open markets were better for everyone. The aggressive new approach sparked conflict with America's trading partners and ignited fierce debate at home, with supporters and critics arguing over the real impact. The stage was set for a major showdown over the future of U.S. trade policy, the limits of presidential power, and the direction of the American economy. The tariffs faced immediate and widespread opposition, sparking protests and heated debates across the country. From city centers to small towns, people voiced their concerns about the new trade policies. Critics included economists, major corporations, small businesses, and leaders from both political parties. The opposition was broad, uniting groups that rarely agreed on economic issues. Many argued the tariffs misunderstood how global trade works and would hurt, not help, the U.S. economy. They warned that disrupting supply chains could lead to job losses and higher prices for everyone. Nearly 50 top economists, including former Fed chairs, said trade deficits weren't a national emergency. They emphasized that trade balances are complex and not necessarily a sign of economic weakness. Businesses relying on imported parts saw costs soar. General Motors and small firms alike warned of financial pain. Some companies even considered layoffs or moving production overseas to survive. Learning Resources Inc., a toy company, led a legal challenge, calling the tariffs an illegal tax on Americans. Their lawsuit argued that the tariffs unfairly targeted U.S. businesses and families. State leaders, led by Oregon's Attorney General, sued, arguing the president overstepped his authority. They claimed the executive branch had gone too far in bypassing established legal processes. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to tax and regulate trade. This fundamental principle was at the heart of the legal battle. Critics said the tariffs bypassed Congress, raising questions about the separation of powers. Many feared this set a dangerous precedent for future trade policy decisions. They also pointed out that American consumers, not foreign exporters, were paying the price through higher costs. Everyday purchases, from groceries to household goods, became more expensive. A Goldman Sachs report confirmed U.S. shoppers bore most of the burden. The data showed that the extra costs were passed directly to consumers. Everyday goods became more expensive, squeezing family budgets and fueling the backlash. For many Americans, the tariffs felt like an extra tax, deepening frustration and driving calls for change. The legal fight over tariffs quickly reached the Supreme Court. The key question: did the president have the authority to impose sweeping tariffs alone? Challengers argued Trump misused the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, which was meant for true emergencies, not trade deficits. The Constitution gives Congress the power to tax and regulate foreign commerce, not the president. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, recognizing its significance for the balance of power. The outcome would define the limits of presidential authority over trade for years to come. The nation watched as the high-stakes arguments approached. At the Supreme Court, both sides made their case. The Trump administration argued the IEEPA gave the president broad power to act in emergencies and that trade deficits threatened national security. They claimed tariffs were essential for economic strength and global leverage. Trump warned that overturning the tariffs could trigger a depression and weaken America's position. The challengers countered that only Congress can tax and regulate trade. They said the IEEPA was never meant to let a president overhaul trade policy. Trade deficits, they argued, are normal, not a crisis. Learning Resources Inc. called the tariffs an illegal $3 trillion tax on Americans. The challengers insisted the president was violating the principle of no taxation without representation. They urged the court to restore constitutional checks and end a damaging economic policy. The justices faced a pivotal decision: uphold broad executive power, or reaffirm Congress's role. The stakes for the economy and the Constitution were enormous. For millions of Americans, tariffs meant higher prices on everyday goods. Suddenly, the weekly grocery run or a trip to the store for essentials became noticeably more expensive. Families found themselves stretching their budgets further, and many had to make tough choices about what to buy and what to leave behind. Companies importing products paid the new taxes and passed the costs to consumers. This ripple effect was felt across the entire supply chain, from the docks and warehouses to the shelves of local stores. Electronics, clothing, toys, and appliances all became more expensive. Even everyday items like shoes, kitchenware, and school supplies saw price hikes, making it harder for families to afford what they needed. A Goldman Sachs study confirmed U.S. consumers and businesses bore most of the cost. Analysts pointed out that the burden didn't just fall on big corporations, it trickled down to ordinary people. American manufacturers relying on imported materials saw their expenses spike, making them less competitive. Many small factories struggled to keep up with rising costs, and some had to cut back on production or staff. Big firms like General Motors could absorb some losses, but small businesses struggled to survive. For many mom-and-pop shops, the tariffs threatened their very existence. Many had to raise prices, cut jobs, or close their doors. The impact rippled through communities, leading to layoffs and uncertainty for workers and their families. The tariffs also triggered retaliation from other countries, hurting U.S. farmers and exporters. Crops and goods that once sold easily overseas now faced new barriers and shrinking markets. American goods became pricier abroad, leading to lost sales and jobs. Factories that depended on exports saw orders dry up, putting even more pressure on workers. The Treasury collected billions in tariff revenue, but critics argued this was just a tax on Americans. The debate over who truly paid the price grew louder as the months went on. If the tariffs were struck down, much of that money would need to be refunded. This created uncertainty for both the government and businesses who had already paid. The economic pain was real, and the debate over who paid the price was at the heart of the legal battle. Across the country, families, workers, and business owners anxiously awaited a resolution. The country waited for the Supreme Court's verdict, hoping for clarity on a policy that touched nearly every American life. On October 25, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered its decision. In a landmark ruling, the court overturned the Trump tariffs. The majority found the president had exceeded his authority under the IEEPA. Trade deficits, they ruled, were not a national emergency justifying sweeping tariffs. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to tax and regulate trade. Allowing a president to use emergency powers for broad tariffs would upset the balance of power. The court clarified that emergency laws are for targeted sanctions, not rewriting trade policy. The decision reaffirmed that only Congress can impose such taxes. The ruling set a precedent, limiting future presidents' ability to bypass Congress on trade. The verdict would reshape U.S. trade policy and presidential power for years to come. The nation braced for the next chapter. The Supreme Court's decision had immediate effects. The Treasury began refunding billions in tariff revenue to businesses. For many small firms, this cash was a lifeline after years of financial strain. With tariffs gone, companies saw costs drop and could become more competitive. Shoppers expected lower prices, though savings would take time to reach store shelves. The ruling reasserted Congress's authority over trade and taxation. Future presidents would need to work with Congress, not act alone. The case set a new standard for the separation of powers in economic policy. While trade debates will continue, the rules are now clearer. Presidential power has limits. In America, even the president must respect the Constitution's checks and balances.